On the morning of Monday, the 18th of December, 1944, a mixed group of white MPs and black American service troops stood guard on the little bridge at Iwil in the Ardennes forest of Belgium. 2 days before, the Germans had attacked some 20 miles away and had broken through the American front virtually everywhere. Now rumors abounded on all sides. The Germans had dropped paratroopers. German saboteurs were cutting American landlines way beyond the front. It was even said that German commandos were trying to free prisoners of war in faraway England. Understandably, this mixed group of Americans was nervous and apprehensive. A jeep containing 3 men in American uniform slowly approached the roadblock. Dutifully, the jeep began to slow down as the men at the barrier raised their weapons, and one of the MPs stepped out into the middle of the road, hand upraised, carbine still slung across his back. The jeep driver braked. There was a small exchange in English, and then the MP asked for the password. The driver paled and stuttered something. "The password, buddy," the MP rasped threateningly as the black soldiers stared at the jeep's 3 occupants. With sudden interest, the jeep driver blustered something about not having been given a password. That was enough for the MP. Each man in the Liege area who was traveling that day had been given a password before leaving his outfit. He indicated that the 3 soldiers in the jeep should get out slowly. Before continue our story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Swiftly, the identities of these 3 Americans who did not know the password were established. They were PFC Charles W. Lawrence, PFC George Sensenbach, and PFC Clarence van der Werth. Nothing very special about that. Now the black soldiers began to examine the jeep, and almost immediately it was discovered that these were no ordinary GIs, for in the gear hidden under the seat they found a huge roll of $100 bills, as fresh as the day they had come off the printing presses. This was not surprising, as they had been printed the week before in a secret German concentration camp forgery plant. For a little while, the searchers suspected that they had apprehended a group of deserters or black marketeers, since the 3 did speak excellent English. Soon, however, the MPs searched the interior of the jeep and found 2 British Sten machine pistols, 2 Colt pistols, 2 German Walther pistols, plastic explosive, a radio transmitter, 6 American hand grenades, and most incriminating of all, cigarette lighters containing poison, the L for lethal pill. The smallest of the 3 started talking. His real name was not George Sensenbach, but Wilhelm Schmidt, and he was a corporal in the German army. It was the sensation of the day. The American soldiers crowded around him as he explained how he and the other 2 had set off from Monschau in Germany on the 12th of December. Some days later, they had successfully penetrated the US lines, posing as members of the 5th US Armored Division. Their mission was infiltrating through the Americans and reporting the condition of the Meuse bridges and of the roads leading to those bridges. The Americans did not wait to hear any more. They raced for the field phones and got in contact with Liege headquarters. There were gasps of excitement at the other end. More Kraut infiltrators. They had to be everywhere. Within 30 minutes, a fleet of jeeps crammed with heavily armed MPs and members of American field intelligence. The CIC were on their way to interrogate the 3 ashen-faced Germans who had less than a week to live. They were later taken to the little Belgian township of Henry Chapelle, a matter of miles away from the homeland they would never see again, tied to stakes and shot to death as spies. Schmidt, who had been one of the first volunteers to join an organization run by the notorious SS commando Otto Skorzeny, he told his impatient interrogators, "Early in November 1944, I reported to an SS camp at Friedenthal, where I was examined as to my linguistic ability by a board consisting of an SS officer, a Luftwaffe, and a naval officer. I passed the test but was ordered to refresh my English. For this purpose, I spent 3 weeks at American prisoner of war camps, where a large number of American war troops were imprisoned. Schmidt had the Sikh men sitting on the edges of their seats, for he now told how the engineers in his group had the task of destroying headquarters and headquarters personnel. Orders to kill General Dwight D. Eisenhower? What headquarters and what headquarters personnel? The CE wanted to know. Now it all came out. Those wild rumors that had run the rounds of Skorzeny's Greif and Fenwar training camp the month before. Their dash across France, disguised as German POWs, to break into the port of Lorient. The surprise attack on Montgomery's headquarters in Holland. The column of captured Tiger tanks that would meet up with the assassins assembling at the Café de la Paix. Paris, to do what? The SICE agents undoubtedly asked excitedly. The answer, to kill General Eisenhower. At the Allies' lavish Versailles headquarters, where it was said that each of Eisenhower's most important 26 aides had double that number of personal aides themselves. Most people had been worrying not about the Germans, but about the imminent approach of Christmas. There was one exception, a minor staff officer named Lieutenant Colonel Gordon Sheen, who was the chief of the U.S. Corps of Counterintelligence, SEACI in Europe. Sheen and his organization were virtually unknown at the Versailles headquarters. He and his agents were shadowy figures fighting to survive in the multitude of intelligence organizations dominated by the CIA's forerunner. The OS besides, Sheen and his men had a bad strike against them. They had incurred the wrath of President Franklin D. Roosevelt, and Sheen, in particular, had probably only been saved from being sacked by his posting overseas to England and then North Africa. Apparently, the Sikh had bugged a room occupied by Staff Sergeant Joseph Lash, an Air Corps non-com who was a personal friend of both Eleanor and Franklin Roosevelt. According to a report dated the 31st of December, 1943, and later submitted to the President, a sexual encounter between Eleanor and the NCO had taken place in the hotel room. As the story goes, when the information was passed on to Roosevelt, he understandably fell into a towering rage. He ordered Lash overseas within 10 hours. After Lash, a suspected communist as well as a seducer, the CC agents followed, also being sent overseas. Whatever the truth of the matter, the C ceased to exist in the United States. Those senior agents who had survived the Washington bloodbath were undoubtedly happy to be overseas and out of FDR's striking range. Sheen must have thought the same, especially when he was appointed to SHAEF. Now the most senior officer of CISI in Europe, he reported directly to General Kenneth Strong, the head of Eisenhower's intelligence group in Europe. Strong was not particularly interested in counterintelligence, at least not yet, and left the rounding up of spies, informers, sleeper agents, and so on, to lesser people. Naturally, Sheen had to produce results to justify his position, or he might well find himself back in the nation's capital, which might prove fatal to his military career. He knew he would not impress a high-ranking intelligence expert such as Strong by arresting a few sleeper agents, and plenty of them had gone underground in Paris. Instead, he concentrated on protecting Eisenhower himself, something that would make the authorities aware of his lowly presence in a great headquarters where half-colonels were a dime a dozen. Soldiers began to apprehend Germans dressed as Americans according to Paris CC records, and those of CC units attached to Army and Corps headquarters throughout the US 12th and 6th Army groups. German troops disguised in American uniforms had begun infiltrating US lines as early as August 1944. In some cases, they were also driving captured US jeeps. No one was able to ascertain their purpose, and as far as the Sishi was concerned, these disguised Germans, sometimes aided by renegade Frenchmen as guides, did not belong to any overall plan. Their activities seemed to have been directed by local commanders. They were scattered all along the long Allied front, so in the end no great importance was attached to them. However, A CC commander did note that 6 German commandos had been apprehended in American uniform that August. By November, things had become more serious and Sheen started to worry. On the 15th, he received a report from a subordinate attached to General Jacob Devers' 6th Army Group headquarters in France. It stated that a company of the 15th Engineers engaged in frontline road repairs had been surprised by an attack force of some 70 Germans, yelling for reasons known only to themselves. All of these Germans had been dressed in American uniforms. Sheen would have been even more worried if he had known that the attack was a dress rehearsal for Operation Northwind, the second stage of the Battle of the Bulge, due to start in Alsace on the 1st of January, 1945. In the same week, the first of a trickle of German prisoners, who would all repeat the same alarming story, told Sheen's interrogators that he had seen a secret order from his headquarters requesting that all English-speaking personnel be sent to Osnabrück in northern Germany. There, according to the German POW, their English-speaking German soldiers would be given special training in reconnaissance and sabotage. Sheen was aware of General Wilhelm Keitel's request that personnel with the ability to speak American English and pass as GIs report to Skorzeny's headquarters at Friedenthal. It did not take too much mental effort to realize that these 4 Germans, captured in American uniforms in Eisenhower, were up to no good. More importantly, they belonged to an organization run by that notorious SS commander Skorzeny. On the basis of Skorzeny's past record between 1943 to 1944, Sheen did not need a crystal ball to realize that Skorzeny was going to use these men in some long-range operation behind the front. Knowing as much as he did of Skorzeny's choice of high-ranking targets, the Big Three, Mussolini, Horthy's son, Tito, this might well mean that the scar-faced Austrian was after an allied big fish. In Sheen's case, the only big fish who mattered in the Paris district was Eisenhower. It is not known at this stage whether Sheen communicated his fears and suspicions to General Strong that first week of December. From all accounts, there seems to have been no noticeable tightening of security at Versailles. At the best of times, security at Supreme Headquarters, staffed by personnel from a dozen different Allied countries, ranging from America to New Zealand, appears to have been quite lax. However, Major Noel Annan, who worked on Strong's intelligence staff, felt that it was the Hangman's dilemma as to who was to blame for an episode that turned drama into farce. One that would soon see Sheen burst into a room at SHAEF headquarters at the Hotel Trianon, crying, "Skorzeny is driving on Paris." Strong, who was chinless, was known to his subordinates as the Hangman's dilemma, because the noose would slip if it ever came to Strong's hanging. Now, the scares spread from Supreme Allied headquarters at Versailles to Paris itself. A rigorous curfew was in force. The capital was put out of bounds to all GS on leave. Suddenly, the place Pig Alley to GS on leave, was deserted of its lounging doughboys and the French tarts in their rabbit fur jackets and cork-heeled wedge shoes. The only Americans seen on the streets were grim-faced security men searching for the would-be killers hired by Skorzeny, the man whom the Americans labeled Public Enemy Number 1. Spies, saboteurs, killers, and para-agents were spotted everywhere. Hundreds of innocent American soldiers were arrested because guards or sentries didn't like the look of them, or they did not give the right answer when challenged. For example, on the morning of the 20th of December, Big Bluff Brig General Bruce Clark, in the midst of a last-ditch defense of the town of Vith with what was left of the 7th Armored Division, was arrested by American military policemen. Over and over he repeated, "But I'm General Bruce Clark of the CCB, Combat Command B." "Like hell," the MPs snarled cynically. "You're one of Skorzeny's men." We were told to watch out for a Kraut posing as a one-star general, while Clark raged knowing that the vital rail and road head of St. Vith might well be lost while he was in jail. The MPs kept him in custody for 5 long hours. In the end, the MPs released him, and one of them had the audacity to ask for his autograph. Nonplussed, Clark gave it to him. Clark was not the only senior officer to be stopped. His commander, General Omar Bradley, recalled later, "3 times I was ordered to prove my identity by cautious GIs. The first time by identifying Springfield as the capital of Illinois. My questioner held out for Chicago. The second time by locating the guard between the center and tackle on a line of scrimmage. The third time by naming the then current spouse of a blonde named Betty Grable. Grable stopped me, but the sentry did not, pleased at having stumped me. He nevertheless passed me on." 500,000 GS played cat and mouse with each other. British Field Marshal Bernard L. Montgomery was another victim. In despair, he pleaded with General William Simpson of the U.S. Ninth Army to provide him with American identity documents so that he could go about his business of trying to re-establish the front in the north. As General Omar Bradley commented, 500,000 Gs played cat and mouse with each other each time they met on the road. Neither rank nor credentials spared the traveler an inquisition at each intersection he passed. On all sides, American tried to trick American. Soldiers on the road would find themselves stopped and a Tommy gun thrust menacingly through the frosted window of their Jeep or truck, with a hoarse voice demanding, "Okay, buddy, who's dem bums? Who is Prunerface? Where does Lyle Abner live? Who works with jigs?" Others, knowing the Germans' difficulty with the letters R and W, tried out intricate tongue twisters on the suspect using those letters. Wrote and Rosie runs round rugged rocks. William wilted visibly when Vera whipped off her woolies, and the like. By now, however, Skorzeny, the scar-faced public enemy #1, had disobeyed Hitler's orders. He had crossed the front line and had seen action in Belgium at Ligneuville, near the scene of the Malmedy massacre, where nearly 100 US POWs had been shot by SS men. He was seriously wounded in the eye and was sent back to the Reich for treatment. His part in this alleged assassination of General Eisenhower was over, but did he really intend to have General Eisenhower assassinated? In May 1945, Skorzeny surrendered to the Americans. At first, no one was interested in him until Colonel Sheen of the CS heard of the arrest. Sheen immediately drove to southern Germany, where Skorzeny was being held, and grilled the Austrian for 6 long hours. Surprisingly, he used an alias, telling Skorzeny that he was the head of US 7th Army Intelligence, which was patently untrue. Why did he do this, after all? He was the man who had first caused the panic at Versailles by declaring, "Skorzeny is driving on Paris." Now he reported to the press in an interview given to the US Forces Paper Stars and Stripes that there had never been a German intention to attack General Eisenhower's headquarters. Was Sheen right? Was he really telling the truth? Or had Otto Skorzeny been blackmailed into stating that he had never intended to kill Ike because Sheen, along with many others who soon would form the CIA, wanted to use Skorzeny's expertise in Russia to uncover the secrets of that new enemy? An enigmatic answer to a historical enigma. What, in later years, did Otto Skorzeny himself report on this matter? Did he really intend to kill the head of Allied forces in Europe? His past record, including the liberation of Mussolini, the attempted assassination of Tito, and the kidnapping of Admiral Horthy's son to keep Hungary allied with Germany, showed that he was prepared to go to any measure to achieve victory for Nazi Germany. With Ike out of the way, the Allied coalition might well have had to fight a much longer war until a new Allied leader was found who would satisfy both Britain and America. So the assassination of General Eisenhower would have achieved an important political and military victory for Germany. Over 30 years ago, This writer met an ailing Otto Skorzeny at a secret rendezvous in Germany. It can now be disclosed that the location was Boberg Hospital near the city of Hamburg, Germany. He had come from his home in Madrid to have 2 tumors excised from his spine, surrounded by his old toughs, many of whom were obviously carrying weapons. When asked if he had really intended to kill Ike, Skorzeny said, "I shall not answer that directly, Herr Whiting. But you must believe this, if I had intended to kill Ike, I would have done so." Then he smiled weakly. It was an enigmatic answer to a historical enigma. So, did Nazi commandos really try to assassinate Eisenhower? The official files lack a signed order, but the panic was very real. Operation Greif's true victory wasn't in a bullet, but in the chaos it sowed, turning ally against ally and making even a general a prisoner in his own headquarters. Help us unravel more of history's greatest mysteries. Your support makes it possible. Subscribe to World War II Journeys for the stories behind the questions. If this tale of spies and suspicion gripped you, let us know. Hit like, subscribe, and in the comments, debate. Do you think the assassination plot was real? Thank you for watching. Until the next investigation.